All right, I'm Mike Schlitt. I'm going to be joined by Cory Buchs as well as Josh Merman for your session, Plan Smarter, Work Faster. So I want to kick off this session with a quote from Benjamin Franklin. And this is very timely, right, as we think about efficiency, and that's kind of what this session is about. If you fail to plan, you are planning to fail. How many of you have your plan together for this season? Yeah, a couple heads nodding. How many of you have done your planter maintenance, right? Is your planter going to run in the field again? That's part of the plan, right? What hybrids, what fields? Those are all things that we've got to put together. And so we're going to kind of talk about the timeliness of this. So on this graph here, we've got the average monthly temperatures in the United States from 2020 to 2024. On the left, you can see temperature, and on the bottom, you can see time, right? So those are the months of the year. And so you can see how that fluctuates. And you probably are think about your operation throughout the season, and you're probably deciding on what task you're going to perform based off of some of these scenarios, right? And there's probably one more. Weather, right? Weather, conditions, things that, again, we don't get to control, but we do manage on how and when we go to the field or what field we go to. So let's think about the tasks within the operation within this time frame. Okay, so if I was a Central Illinois grower, I'd probably kick off my season with some spring tillage. Now, spring tillage is what I'm going to utilize to prepare the ground for the very next task, which is that planter pass. And the planter pass is very challenging because I know there's an agronomic value as well as a cost to going to the field the wrong days due to, again, those conditions, time, temperature, and weather events. And so I'm really just playing a dodge the weather game at this point. And then I've got that next phase, which is actually more of a protection as I go into managing weeds within that crop. So I'm protecting what I've done with that planter pass. And the challenge, as we talk timeliness and windows of opportunity for each one of these tasks, the challenge is I may be running the planter the same time I need to be running the sprayer, depending on how many fields and how many acres I have, right? And so the other challenge is, if you have water hemp, you may have 3 days to get in there and spray that water hemp. Meanwhile, you're still trying to plant fields, and it's the optimum time to do that. So now you're playing a game at that point, and you're overcoming those challenges. And then as far as we think of the fungicide or the fungicide piece, as disease comes into those crops, we've got to protect those crops so that they have standability throughout all the way to harvest. Which brings us to harvest. And this is where we get to sit in the combine cab and we get to look at the yield monitor and we get to look at how every task prior to that set us up for success. And it's paying us those dividends as we're looking at it in the yield monitor. And then at the very end, usually how we would wrap our season would be a fall tillage. Again, as we're trying to prep for the following year. And the challenge with fall tillage is it's the last thing. So it's the one that's pushed to the end of the season. And so how much time do I have? How early did I get all those other tasks done? Is there time? I've seen seasons in Central Illinois where we were not able to get our fall tillage in. And so that creates new challenges. And so there is an agronomic value to the timeliness of each one of these tasks. Would you agree? All right, so as we think about today, what time of year is it? This is the time to put your plan together. As growers in this room right now, you're probably thinking, what can I learn? What can I take away? You might have learned something at the lunch table, right, as you're having lunch with your neighbor, sitting next to somebody right here. There's a time to plan, now's the time. That's why this session is so timely, as you're thinking ahead of what do I need to do? How do I attack one of these, maybe better or make an improvement? And then you have the window of execution. Now, I like to call the window of execution a window of opportunity, because this is where you set the bar for everything as you think about when you're sitting in that combine, right? And you're looking at that yield as it's changed. And so again, planter maintenance, what hybrids in what fields, tillage practices. Again, this whole session is about the timeliness and the agronomic value or return on when you go to the field with each of these tasks. And so as I opened it up with a quote by Benjamin Franklin, I'm now going to pass it over to Cory Buchs, who's going to talk us through and walk us through a very viable solution to those challenges of planning.
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. So as Mike said, my name's Cory Buchs, and I'm here to talk about the benefits of planning. Now I know planning requires forethought, requires effort, requires time. So there better be some benefits, there better be some ROI. I'm going to talk about this from the perspective of my family farm. So our family farms in northeast Indiana. We farm about 1,500 acres, spread across about 18 different fields. The fields and the terrain are a bit more rolling than here, so they're a bit more broken up, oddly shaped, and a bit more difficult to manage from a boundary exclusion zone waterway perspective. We have a pretty typical rotation of corn and soybeans with a little bit of wheat. We run some Deere equipment, we run some AGCO equipment, we run several different implement brands as well, but we've got some equipment that's 30 years old and some equipment that's bought within the last couple of years. It's my dad that runs the operation, so you can see him in the picture there. We've got 2 part-time employees. No, those aren't the employees in the picture. But we've got 2 part-time employees, 2 retired farmers that love to just get that seat time every year. So we're fortunate to have people that know how to operate equipment and can help us out, especially during busy seasons. I would say that the team on the farm, on our farm, is, like I mentioned, very good at operating equipment, very good at fixing things, but technology is not our strong suit, and a lot of that just comes with the demographic of the group, if you will. And so we have the asterisk there for me, so I'm on the farm as well, but only when available. And my dad would, if he saw this slide, he'd want to increase the font there and say, when available has a huge asterisk because I'm not a very reliable employee in that regard. So when it comes to technology, we know our limits, but we also try to invest where it makes sense, where we're going to get a return on that investment. And so we pencil out, like I'm sure all of you guys do, if we buy a guidance system, when is it going to pay for itself? Or if we invest in variable rate, when is it going to pay for itself? Well, the assumption we're always making is that we're going to use it across every acre of our farm. And that's where a lot of times we get into challenges. And so one of the challenges we have is exactly that. It's utilizing the technology to its fullest extent. And so you can see here in these pictures, pretty cool picture, kind of planting into the sunset. But what's wrong with that picture is that we've got the marker down, but yet we've got a guidance system in the cab. Why would that be? Why is the guy using the marker? Well, he pulled into the field. It might have been the first field for the season, so he forgot how to set up the system, forgot how to set up the Headlands guidance feature within the software, and said, well, I'll just get to work. I don't have time to waste. I'll get to work, and I'll figure it out once I get to the infill area. So in this case, we aren't really getting the return on investment for this part of the field because we're not actually using the guidance system. Another example, which I think many find hard to believe, but it happens on our farm, so I'm sure it has happened on yours. We've made the decision to invest in variable rate. We've updated our equipment. Our fertilizer spreader can apply a variable rate map. We've hired an agronomist. We pay them to go out and do soil sampling. We get the maps back. We go to the field. We're ready to spread, and we forgot the map. What do we do in that case? Well, you can either wait, have someone run back and get the map for you, or you can punch in a flat rate and go and maybe operate based on memory from when you looked at the map. Oh, I remember in the back there we applied a little bit more lime than the front. And so these are situations where we're really not utilizing the technology as we should. They don't happen all the time, but when they happen, they're costly. Another situation that happens from time to time on our farm is this one on the left. So when you open a field and you see 50 different guidance lines, well, why are there 50 different guidance lines? Well, it's because the last guy did the same thing. He came into the field, he said, there's too many lines, I don't know which line to use, so I'll just create a new one. And so this is one of those situations that compounds on itself. You wouldn't think this would happen within your farm, but I can promise you that it does. When guys are in the field, they solve the problem however they know how to just get to work. And so this can be costly, of course, when you're going in for that second or third pass, maybe to side dress or to spray or to do something within an existing crop. Another situation we got into was with a contractor spraying our fields, not really having a grasp of where he should be and where he shouldn't, especially with a loaded sprayer. And so we have had a situation here. We've had similar situations, but the opposite. I mentioned that fields are chunked up a bit, and you can see on the bottom left here, maybe you have to cross a creek to catch that last 5 acres within a field before taking off, maybe forgetting to do that. That's happened from time to time as well. So here we're just, due to operator error, wasting time. And then finally, again, in the area of wasting time, as I'm sure you can all attest, when you're at the end of the season, you're an expert on that planter. You're an expert on that sprayer. You spent a ton of time in the seat. You know everything about it. But somehow, the next year, just 6 months or 9 months later, when you jump back into the cab, it's a foreign environment. You don't remember how to set things up. Maybe you're trying to do something out of the ordinary. And typically, what happens here, especially at the beginning of the season, is you sit on the edge of the field, burning time, burning diesel. 20 minutes at the edge of the field is not uncommon in these situations. 20 minutes with a 40-foot planter, not even high speed, is 10 to 15 acres. So that's a lot of lost productivity that you have there. So what are the things we can do to try to solve some of these challenges? So on our farm, the way we see it and the way we've approached this is to focus on the foundational level first. And so what we see as the foundational level is data management. And so we see the opportunity and saw the opportunity and really invested our time in it, in cleaning things up. And we do this in the off season, so we do this now. So this isn't something we want to think about while we're operating in those critical time windows. We want to think about this today. And so we use FarmENGAGE for this. We use FarmENGAGE because for our fleet, remember we have some Deere equipment, some AGCO equipment, some equipment as old as 30 years. FarmENGAGE enables us to connect to all of those different types of machines and pull in data from all of those machines throughout the year. So as mentioned, we don't think about data throughout the year. We're out in the field getting work done, but what FarmENGAGE is doing for us is pulling that data into a central location. Then this time of year, when I definitely don't want to be outside, I can sit down and I can invest the time to clean things up. So what you can see on the screen here is us going through maybe marking exclusion zones. So those areas we definitely don't want to spray where we're investing in maybe ride to prevent erosion. Maybe we're creating new guidance lines to make sure that we have lines defined for our planting pass next year and that it's crystal clear what line they should be using. Or maybe we're updating variable rate maps to make sure that the new program we want to implement has maps to reflect that. So once we get everything cleaned up and ready to go, we redeploy that data out to all of our machines and ultimately ensure that each machine has only the data required for the jobs that next season. And so what we're really trying to do here is make it as easy as possible for the operator. We're trying to make it stupid proof, really, is what we're trying to do. And so the other benefit here is as we've cleaned up data, as we've gotten those systems set up on the machine exactly how we want them, when I do get that call for the operator asking for help, I know exactly what they're looking at, and as they're completing work, the data they're using is logged correctly, and the next year I need to do this, I'm in a better state and don't have to invest as much time and energy. So you may be noting, well, there's still an opportunity for error. You're still asking the operator to set things up within a display they may not be familiar with, and that's definitely true. We find on our farm, we don't typically have errors or mistakes unless we're trying to do something out of the ordinary. Maybe we learned at winter conference we can apply a little less fertilizer than what we have in the past, or maybe we're trying to increase a population, or maybe we're trying to plant a specific variety in a specific area. What we find is when we're trying to do something out of the ordinary, we have communication challenges. And so in many cases, the operators know what to do, but if it's something different than normal, they're going to do what they've always done. And in those cases, obviously what we're intending to have happen doesn't happen. And so this is where our work orders functionality comes in. So with our work orders functionality, we can define all the details about every job we need to complete throughout the season. So you can think of this as a seasonal to-do list assigned to each field, assigned to each machine, assigned to each operator, and even day. So we can have a detailed plan for our operation for a specific season. So this really enables us to start to run our business like a true professional business instead of one that operates based on slips of paper and phone calls and text messages, et cetera. And so with this work order functionality, the operator can pull up the list of what they need to do. They can select a work order. The work order tells them which field they should be in, gives them the directions to that field, so how to get there, tells them the rate to set on the monitor, the variety to set, the guidance line to use, the boundary to use, et cetera. So leaves nothing open for error or open for decision or chance. And so this really enables us, again, as the farm manager, to not only ensure that things get done as we intended, but also have clear records of what happened and be able to track what's happening across the farm. And so finally, we have the opportunity with the work order functionality to take it a step further. So there's still the challenge of the operator needing to set up the display, needing to remember how to go through every step within the application on the machine. And so to address that, we can use the same work orders functionality that I just described, but we can send those work orders directly to the machine. So directly to a PTX terminal or AGCO machines, and ultimately define everything about that machine setup that needs to happen. So our vehicle and implement configuration, our guidance lines, our boundaries, our variable rate maps, et cetera. And so what this enables is for when the operator pulls in the field to press one button and get right to work, ultimately avoiding all errors and wasted time. So to wrap things up on planning here, what I hope you can see is that this isn't really an all or nothing proposition. So there's many different levels of investment that you can choose to make in planning, really to move your farm to more of a professionally managed organization and to really prevent those errors, prevent that downtime, and ensure that things are completed correctly. It's up to you as to what level of investment makes sense for you. This requires time, this requires effort from you. But what we found is the time that we invest in the off season in organizing and ensuring that we have things set up correctly really pays dividend and makes things much less stressful and much more efficient when we get to those critical time windows. And so we use FarmENGAGE for this. We use FarmENGAGE primarily because it enables us to plan, but also track and collect accurate records of what's happening across our farm, records we can use with our agronomists, with our record-keeping applications to better analyze what we need to do in the future. We also use FarmENGAGE because it enables us to connect to our entire fleet. We have a diverse fleet of equipment, and FarmENGAGE is very useful for enabling us to connect to not just our PTX terminals, but our AGCO machines as well as our Deere equipment using the factory Deere displays. And so finally, in general, we finished planning for the season, and I think we're ready to move into the most exciting part of the year, which is ultimately getting to work in the field. And for that, I'll pass it to Mike. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you, Cory. Good job. All right, so Cory just got us through the planning phase, right? Does everybody feel like they got a good plan together? Ready to execute? Because that's the next step. All right, so now as we think of the execution piece, how do we bring all that and provide that into the window of opportunity, right? And so now I've been with precision planting this is my 20th year, and so I'm very passionate about the planter pass. And so I'm going to kind of dive into focusing on that planting window with that planter pass. And so as we think about this, that planter sets the foundation of our yield opportunity, right? You've heard the saying, how many chances do we get? How many opportunities do we get, right? It's one. It's one chance per season. And so I'd like to go back and think through your seasons, or think of this season coming up. What's going to kick that season off? At what point do you say, hey, it's time to get in the planter and it's time to go? And I think I have an idea. As I've worked with growers and dealers around the regions, there's usually one grower out there. Let's call him, let's say, Let's Go Larry, okay? He's the first guy in the area that goes. You always wait till Larry goes, and then maybe a day or a week later, then you're going to the field. You can also call him Mud-In Marvin. Whatever you prefer, you know his name. Okay, that's when the window opens, right? And then think about the challenges as we go through that. And then so some seasons start earlier, some seasons start late, and some seasons just get dragged on, again, due to the conditions that we talked about, weather, temperature, those things. But first, before we go too much deeper there, I want to take you all back to 2015. How many of you came to Winter Conference in 2015? Okay, some of you. Do you recall that we announced a solution for high-speed planting? Right? So when you think about high speed, what's the purpose of high speed? Well, it's efficiency. It's getting more done. Okay? And so at this point, this was not the first time I had ever heard of high-speed planting. This was when we provided a solution. I'd have to take you back to 2009 when I took a phone call about 10 o'clock at night. We'll call this grower Ricky Bobby. Okay, so Ricky Bobby's on the phone, and he said, man, he's got a 2020 monitor. His spacing is just not good. His good ride, which means row unit ride, so how much that row unit is bouncing through the field, is very rough. And I just said, hey, Ricky, how fast are you going? And he said very openly, 7.5. Now that we have planters in 2025, 2026 going 10 mile an hour, 7.5 doesn't sound very fast. But in 2009, 6.5 was the fastest I had ever heard. And I just said, do you realize the impact that you're having by planting that fast? And he goes, do you realize that I got started late? I have this small of a window. It's not even really that fit, but I have to go and get so much work done in so little time. And this window opened, I've got to go for it. And I get it, right? Speed. Higher speed means I'm going to get more acres done. But at what cost? And so I challenged him. I said, it's at the cost of accuracy. How many opportunities do you get to do this? He did, while I was on the phone, slow down to 6.5. Now, I'm pretty sure after I hung that up, he went back to 7.5, right? His name's Ricky Bobby for a reason. So again, those are the challenges. And on top of that, a rain was coming. So as we think about it, we know what happens, right? Is this what happens on your operation? And make sure if you take your planter into the field that you can get back out, because that's a couple days delay and the next days might have been perfect. Right? And so there is value in picking the days that you go to the field. Are there days that are fit? Are there days that are unfit? Are there days that are, I don't know, what should I do? What are the challenges? So the first thing you need to think about is in your operation, how many days does it take you to get that planting window closed? How many days does it take you? You know your planter, you know your acres. Okay, and then how many days do you think you're going to get? In the month of May, in a month, you may get 10 days. Is that enough? So then you've got to start thinking, I either need to be more efficient with the time I have, or it's just going to take me longer. And seasons are not very forgivable. But what's the value, right? We know the challenges, the weather, the field conditions, how long it takes a certain field to dry out, what weather is coming. So what's the value? Well, let's think about it. As I look at ear count potential, I've got two polar opposite scenarios. What if I go plant into damp conditions? Well, at that point, I'm probably going to create compaction. We've all seen how compaction limits or challenges how early we're going to emerge, right? And then I can take that to the flip side, where I can say, what if I go to a field where it's too dry? Well, do I have moisture? And how dry is it? I mean, I've had a grower call in who's actually calling and saying, hey, should I go to the field? I don't know the grower. I don't know where he's located. I said, why are you asking me? He said, because I'm out here, I'm kicking the ground, and it's as hard as concrete. And I said, well, first of all, that means there's no moisture there. So I'd wait for a rain. And number two, you probably don't even have enough weight on the bar to get to depth. And so I think you're going to have a train wreck. Now, he chose to go to a different field that didn't have those same challenges. That's what you have to do. You have to manage what you can manage, right? And then when you have that ideal condition, go, right? Take advantage of that opportunity. So what's the agronomic cost? So if I go from 92% ear potential to 96.6%, what's the value? What's the value of opportunity of picking the day, the right day, and putting that crop into the right conditions? 10 bushel, okay? 10 bushel in this scenario. So as I think, again, as I'm talking the efficiency piece, and I think, again, at 2015, the status quo at that time was, well, how do I get more efficiency? How do I get more done in the same amount of time? Well, we'd have growers that were going from 12-row planters to 16 rows, 16 to 24 rows. More rows means more acres, right? Then we had the other alternative that cost a lot more. Maybe didn't work out for everybody, but I'm going to add a second planter, which now means I need another tractor, and it means I need another operator in the cab. And then our solution was, why don't you take the planter that you have today and just go a little faster? So what we'd do is we'd have growers that would add our high-speed solution, which was speed tube, that's what we announced, and they would go from 5 mile an hour to 7 mile an hour. And once they were comfortable and confident, then they'd go to 8 and 9 and sometimes 10, depending on how comfortable is the ride in the cab at 10 mile an hour. Depends on the cab, right? And so those are the things. So again, solutions for challenges, efficiency. So we just briefly talked about a few of those challenges that we faced during that planting window and the value, the agronomic value of being picky about when you go to the field, right? So what I want you to do now is I want you to take that same mindset, take the same agronomic value, the same efficiency mindset, and bring that over to the tillage and the harvest window. Okay, and think about that. So we're going to kind of jump towards the end and think of the challenges there. Now, one challenge that's pretty fresh in my mind is challenges that I can't control. So in 2025, Thanksgiving weekend, we had about 6 inches of snow. Think about your operation. Were you guys finished by Thanksgiving? Most of you might say yes. Well, that means you got everything done in an orderly time and you were able to close up your operation in time. But did you set that deadline? No. Did you close that door? No. Mother Nature did. So again, that's something you can't control. And again, that's why the efficiency of every one of those tasks is key, because otherwise, when you get to the end, what are you going to sacrifice? Well, you're not going to leave the crop in the field, right? But you may not get the tillage. So that's why we want to talk about being more timely and more efficient. And so that should make you feel a little uncomfortable. Now, one nice thing as we get to the combine, you're actually getting to look at everything that you planned for, what you prepared the ground for, how you set the opportunity with that planter pass, and then how you protected it with the sprayer pass. Right, and so we think of these. This is why sitting in the combine looking at the yield monitor is so rewarding when it looks good, because you did that. You picked the right days. You did the right hybrid. You worked the ground the right way. You protected it the right way. And when it doesn't look so good, it hurts. Pain causes us to make changes, right? Now, Josh is going to go much deeper into the challenges of harvest, but as we just think about harvest, the challenges, it's kind of like a marathon, right? It takes more people, it takes more equipment, and it's, again, it's one of the last pieces. What about tillage? Tillage gets pushed to the end because it's the last thing. So think about like fall tillage. Is there value in fall tillage? Are you doing fall tillage? Honestly, the combine starts the residue breakdown process, and that fall tillage continues and carries that on. Right? And so again, we're kind of prepping for that next season. It gets pushed to the end. Typically what I see with the growers I've talked to is they're running tillage nonstop around the clock. Why is that? Because it's the last thing and they don't know when the window closes. Right? When does the door on that season close? But what if I could start tillage earlier? Right? How many of you are waiting to start tillage after harvest? Yeah. It's pretty common. Well, let's think about what the values are. What's the return on your investment if you could start earlier? Well, we know that starting earlier, when there are warmer temperatures, gives us more time for those microbes to feed on that carbon, right? Think of carbon. Residue is carbon. It starts to break that down. We know there is a carbon penalty that has to be paid, which means there's so many days that has to break down in order for those nutrients within that residue or that carbon to be utilized in the spring. Otherwise, it's tied up and it's immobilized. Right? And so nutrients available in the spring is a good thing, is a positive thing. We kick that off with an earlier tillage. And then I've also seen where tillage was the last thing and it ran very late because harvest ran very late because spring started late. And then we went into the next spring, because again, tillage is the last. We go into the next spring and the residue is extremely dense, thick. It hasn't had time to break down. It actually caused planter issues and was very challenging on managing that residue with that planter pass. So again, what if we could start earlier? So now Josh is going to actually join us up here, and he's going to talk through some very valid, timely solutions for both of those challenges. Josh.
Thank you, Mike. Well, good afternoon, everyone. So I'm going to start by talking to you about our operation in central Nebraska. So I'm from just south of the Hastings area. My dad and my uncle are the primary operators of the farm. It's about a 3,000-acre corn and soybean operation. My cousin, who's the same age as me, is introduced into the farm operation now. And like Cory, I help when I can, but I have a day job as well. So my help is fairly spotty. And so throughout the year, we have generally as much help as we need. We can get the things done and the time windows that matter. You know, you heard Mike talking about the planning window especially. We can crank through a lot of acres in a hurry. But during the harvest time is, of course, when we need the most boots on the ground. We need the most help. And we generally hire a guy that's retired mostly, and he comes and runs a grain cart for us. And I have a few siblings, and they like to come help out on the farm as well. And while they like to come out and help, they may not be the best help always. You know, they're not used to running equipment, and sometimes we have to lean on a grain scoop and, you know, clean up a bit. And of course, I'm not innocent either. And it's not just that kind of help. It's maybe you do have someone that's hired, but they don't quite show up when you want them to, and they have to leave early sometimes. And we all know that labor can be a challenge, and it can be hard to find someone that's reliable to work for your operation. And that's not to mention what Mike said, where it's important to get it done in a timely manner. So, you know, maybe you don't have much time or you don't have someone you can call. And that's not the case for us. Or that is the case for us. We don't have that person we can always just call and scale, right? And so as we think about the to-do items that many of you have heard about, kind of relate to today, of items that start when you finish harvest or start when you harvest, and then go all the way through the spring planting season. There's a number of to-dos and post-its on here that you can consider. And for our farm, we have succession plans, and we're thinking about those things. And they're not always to-dos that you want to think about for the next year, that you're, you know, for your next year's crop, but also for the next 5 to 10 years for the legacy of the farm. And so oftentimes with a lot of these to-dos, it's, well, I just don't have enough time in a day. You know, I can't make more time. I don't have time this year to do that tiling job, or I don't have time this year to plant cover crops, even though I would have liked to. You know, winter just came in too fast. Harvest was delayed. And so there's a lot of these things that you can think about that would be great to do. And you, like I said, you hear about some of them today, but you just don't have enough time. And then you can finally get to the plant. So there's a number of decisions that affect your business directly, right? We all know that. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about harvest timeliness and how that can stack up and lead to a direct loss. And you can see here on this slide, along the top, there's a white line. And the higher that white line is, the more of the profit you're capturing in the field that you planted. And simply, it's generally related to the moisture of the crop and the condition of the crop. So maybe late in the season, it starts to fall over, and of course, you're harvesting less. Obviously, we know that beans harvested at 12 are worth more than 8 moisture. And so for this particular year, we were getting out started early, some high moisture corn for a local feed yard next to us. We're even spending time checking the combine. You know, we're doing good, we're doing great. Well, next 20 minutes later, the service truck shows up and all of our plans are out the window, at least for that day, and now we're pushing that timeline back. You can see a little bit of time added there, and then it rained, and that adds more time to your harvest period, and then and then it breaks down again, and this year in 2017, we had a windstorm that came through late in the year, and we weren't done harvesting yet, and it blew the crop down. Now I went back to our data for that particular field, and compared to our average across the rest of our acres, we lost $27,000 in potential on that field. Now that's not going to happen every year, but you can start to see how those incremental changes in your timeline can make a difference and can add up. You know, we all know Murphy's Law, if it can go wrong, it will, and it's not going to be every year, but you know, those things tend to happen. And we haven't even started talking about tillage with this example, so we got pushed back, and now we're butting into our next season, and now everything else is set behind. And Mike said, the tillage pass often starts the advanced nutrient breakdown, and so that's affecting the next year's crop already, you know, and we haven't even started tillage yet. So we're talking about efficiency and timeliness, and we know that it's important to get these things done on time. There's a true value to that. We know that with planting, of course, and now we know that with harvest, and you guys, of course, knew that already too. And so what tools can we have? What do we have the ability to change? We can't make more time in a day. And even if there was more time in a day, we're just going to be exhausted. You know, you could work longer, perhaps, you know, move from 18 hours a day to 20 hours a day, but, you know, that won't last very long either. So what can we do? And I want to talk to you about the OutRun Autonomy platform. The OutRun Autonomy platform is one platform that does many tasks. And that's important because just like your tractor can hitch to many different implements, your autonomous platform should be able to do the same thing and be able to be flexible. And you provide the return of your tractor investment by spreading it across different operations that are of value, and you can do the same thing with your autonomy platform. And so you'll see a few clips here of the OutRun system working, and you may notice a few different things. We're doing the mini tasks, and so we're working through the harvest operation with the autonomous cart, and we're doing some tillage in spring and in fall, and we're spread across a couple different brands. You can see here in the two clips up there, they're working together. We're doing harvest in one screen there and tillage in another. And so OutRun can retrofit onto the equipment you already own. So core AGCO strategy is to, you know, build on the equipment you own, make it smarter. You already invested in the iron. You know, we support a portfolio of products back to 2014. You know, you don't need to go out and invest in a new tractor that's auto ready, for example. We can make the one in your shed smarter. And so we bolt on a piece of hardware to the top of the machine, and in a day, your tractor can go from, you know, a normal manually operated tractor to one that can work for you and to give you time back in your day. And we provide flexibility, and I think this is the most important part of OutRun and autonomy. And it depends on the operation, but I'll talk through a couple examples. And so for the harvest solution, we allow you to augment your harvest team. We know it's important to get work done on time. You take that guy and put him in a truck and maybe get another load done. Perhaps your drive is more related to getting tillage done on time. And so when you've finished harvesting your first field, you pull in a tillage tractor and have that tractor work behind you as your core team works through harvest. And so now imagine the scenario where you're done harvest and a couple days later you're done with your tillage because you've kept up that autonomous tractor working behind your combine. Or perhaps you're most pressed in the spring, and as you're trying to keep ahead of your fast planter, you just can't keep ahead with your seedbed prep with your field cultivator. Well, now you can have the OutRun system working, you know, at all hours of the night to keep ahead of your fast planter, and you can have that guy that was sitting in the field cultivator helping tend your planter. And so those are just a few examples, a few scenarios of how the OutRun system can help your operation. Of course, we all know every operation is different. The equation is going to be a little bit different for every year and for every different operation. As we were designing the OutRun system, I'm sitting in the combine cab, I'm doing tillage, and I'm thinking about my needs as a producer. You know, I'm a farmer too. And I'm thinking about, you know, I don't want this thing to be a challenge to use. I need it to be simpler, or as simple as a human operator in interacting with them. And I need it to work with my environment. And so as we talk through the design of the application, keep that in mind that I'm a farmer. We're designing this for farmers to be simple and easy to use. And so here's the setup of the OutRun system in our combine cab this fall. I took this picture. And you can see I have an iPad mounted there, and with that iPad I have full control over the grain cart for all of the in-field operations. And so I can call it to me, I can unload on the go, and I can send it back to the truck when it's full. And so when it comes to you, it's a one-button press operation. Remember I said it needed to be simple. So 2 of the 3 of the tasks I mentioned, you press one button on the iPad, and it does the task, follows you, matches your speed, and then you can unload simply. So it takes one of the more stressful operations of the harvest and really simplifies it. And if you miss yelling at your grain cart driver, you could still yell at your iPad, or maybe call up someone else to yell at, but it's right there with you. And then when it's done, you can send it to the truck. Now for this particular screenshot, we were harvesting soybeans that day, and we were down from a normal 4-person crew to 2. Myself and my uncle. And my uncle calls me up, he says, "Hey, Josh, I gotta go run fuel to my son, he's out baling." Of course, we know the timeliness of baling. And he's like, "Can we try your autonomy thing? Maybe you can get that cart full and we can keep going. I'll take the truck when I get back." I said, "Yep, sure, let's give it a shot." And so I was able to keep harvesting for the next 30 minutes or so and get the cart full. And not just in a way that the combine's deadheading. I kept harvesting normally like you would, efficiently. And he got there coincidentally about the same time the cart did. It was following this exact path. And so he took that to town. He's like, "Well, I guess we could do that again." And so he put it back in auto mode, and I kept harvesting. And so that's just one situation where it worked well for us to keep the harvester moving, to get those incremental improvements in timeliness that start to add up to those late season events where you could have significant loss. And so you might be thinking to yourself, well, that's great, but I'm probably not going to invest in a whole new system just to help me harvest a little bit. And I agree. I said early on, it's one platform that does many tasks. And so the other task that we have, and it'll be an expanding portfolio, the other task I'm going to talk about today is the tillage task. And so with the tillage task, it's also designed with you in mind and the users in mind. And so say you have an OutRun system, and for the first time, you're going to go harvest, or you're going to go till this field autonomously. And so you can show up to that field without doing any auto-ready preparation. You could till a boundary around the edge of your field, get your implement set up during that pass, generate a task, this is all on your phone, and you say, "Yep, I want it to go at 5 degrees, let's go." And then set the tractor free. So as it's doing that, we give you full mission and machine monitoring as if you were in the seat. So you know how that red light can come up in your cab. Of course, you don't want that to happen while there's no one in there. So we give you that information because we want to make sure your tractor investment is protected. We give you a 360-degree view around the cab, so it's like you're sitting in the seat. So you can watch how good a job the tillage tool is doing, and you can make sure there's nothing odd in the field. And if there's a wet spot, you could react to that. And then we give you, of course, full monitoring of the mission. So you know when it's going to get done. You can plan your day around the tool of when it's going to be complete. And if it's going to be done at 3 a.m., it'll sit there and shut off and wait for you to move it the next day. Unless you're really ambitious and you can go move it at 3 a.m. Now, who here has perfectly square level fields? No one. Surely there's someone. I know I don't. I'm from Nebraska. We have, a significant terrain difference from the west to the east of the state. And so the OutRun system is designed to be able to customize to the needs of your field and to the desires of your tillage operation. And so you can see here in this field, there's kind of red veins running through those. Those are grass waterways, areas you don't want to till. And so you have the ability to mark those off in real time or before, and that'll be a no-till zone. And the customization is really important for us, and giving you the options to set the task up exactly how you want it done is really important. And like I said earlier, it's designed for farmers. For myself, I want it to work for my operation, and so I know it can work for yours as well. And here's a brief clip of that exact field, that exact situation, where the tillage tool is going to lift up, it's going to drive through the waterway, and then it's going to continue on. And you might ask yourself, well, why is it doing this weird skip pattern? That's not something I would do. My neighbor would think that's weird. And you might agree, but the OutRun and the autonomy system is calculating the most optimal path, given the turns and the constraints of the tillage tool. That's the fastest and most efficient route it's going to take. So it may save you a little bit of time. Well, if you're doing seedbed prep, you're like, well, that's pretty silly. I needed to do sequential passes along the field so I can stay in front of the planter, and of course that's an option we provide as well. And so let's compare timelines of a manual operation shown here on the top and the OutRun system shown here on the bottom. And so let's pretend this is a field that you've never tilled autonomously, so you have to do that boundary pass along the outside of the field. Then you set it into auto. Now I'm a pessimist, or maybe I'm a realist, or both, but you know what, it's sprinkled or it's a dirty day and dang, I gotta go clean the camera off because it can't quite see right. We need to operate safely. And maybe I have to do that twice. And of course it's probably your field farthest away, so let's build that into this example as well. You're spending a couple hours having to service this thing. Well, even with those interruptions, you're still saving half of your time that you would normally be sitting in that tractor seat. And so then I ask you, what would you be doing with that time back? You go back to some of those earlier examples I talked about primary tillage during harvest. Or if you're outside of harvest, maybe it's those other to-do Post-it notes I listed first off, where you're spending the time maybe building up the soil fertility this year, or putting in tile. Or maybe it's going to your kid's basketball game, I don't know. Maybe you want to shoot a deer this year, and you're going to spend some more time in the deer stand, and your tractor's out tilling, and you got a little bit of free time. That's okay too, It's okay to make your life easier. And so shortly you'll hear from a grower out in western Nebraska about how he's used the OutRun system, and he's been able to trust it and really make his life easier, and not just his, but his family's as well.
My biggest surprise was how quickly I began to trust the system. My nephew was just here the other weekend, and he's about 12 years old, and his first question was, how do you trust that thing? And I thought about it to myself, and it really didn't take that long. After it gets up next to you, it's linked with the combine, it stays a certain distance away, and it just seems normal now. OutRun has allowed my dad to focus more on trucking instead of where I want each grain cart and running around and being exhausted by the end of the day. It's allowed my wife to stay home with the kids and get other stuff done, and it allows me, the combine operator, to just keep going. I was really impressed with it during bean harvest. Around here, bean harvest is also the same time as wheat drilling, so it's like having an extra person on the farm helping out. It's just a busy time of year, and it just helps us get the work done on time.
So you heard from Derek there about how he was able to bring the OutRun system on, and he got the value out of it by getting some wheat seeding done while he was harvesting, of course, but also just make his life easier, make it less hectic for him. And so I want you to think about, with your operations, what tasks should you be doing with the time back? And for me personally, I'm farming and I'm working a job as well, and if I want to be successful at both, I really need to get more time in the day and be able to leverage my capabilities, and working more hours just isn't always the answer. That only goes so far. And so a tool like OutRun could give me that opportunity to get more done in the time that we have. And we've been talking about how autonomy, you can prepare for autonomy. We're going to be autonomy ready. Well, it's available now. Autonomy is ready to help you. And so think about those things that you might do. And so throughout this session, we talked about how important it is to plan for success. And then as we move to execute those plans, how can we do those in a timely manner? And so we talked about FarmENGAGE, setting the basis, using the work orders, and then how OutRun could be a tool to give us more time in a day. And so on behalf of Mike and Cory, thank you so much for your time and attention. I hope we've given you some things to think about on how you can take your operations to the next level. And so thank you so much.